I think everyone has. We'll get started in just a moment. We're going to do a family photo.
Vamos a empezar en unos minutos, vamos a hacer una foto de grupo, estamos esperando por una persona más y luego comenzamos con la discusión en el panel.
I think if all the ministers could please come to the front and panelists will do a photo. Thank you so much for being here. Sorry about the late start. Oh, just a one more moment. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome to Women Building Peace in an Age of Crises and Armed Conflicts, how feminist approaches to foreign policy can advance peacekeeping and peace building. My name is Phoebe Donnelly, and I lead the Women, Peace, and Security program at the International Peace Institute, and I'll be moderating today's event. We're going to start with our gracious host, our co-chairs of the Feminist Foreign Policy Plus group. It's my pleasure to turn the floor to His Excellency Tani Mohamed Soilihi, Minister for Francophonie and International Partnerships for France.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak in French, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I thank Colombia and the IPI for having contributed to the organization of this major event. Since 2022, the FIPP Plus has evolved and extended to include 20 members today. Morocco, Slovenia, Nepal, the UK, and the UK join us today. Welcome to you, and we hope that this dynamic will continue. The Declaration and Program of Action of Pekin of 2030 and the Pact for the Future carry our vision for a prosperous and sustainable future for women and children. I would like to salute the work of UN Women and of UNFPA, who are resolutely working on the ground in a budgetary and political context that is very challenging. And when we see that gender equality is being questioned, 2025 is also the 25th anniversary of the 1325 resolution of the Security Council. The context of this resolution is a major milestone in the multilateral infrastructure for peace and security. Sexual violence is among the most silenced crises of history, when in fact we have the capacity to fight this. We must fight this. The use of rape as a weapon of war in Haiti, in Sudan, in DRC, in Iraq, in the Central African Republic, and everywhere where these crimes are committed, where women and children are reduced to the status of victim. We cannot allow this. The resolution is a symbol of the sustainability of peace accords. France is committed to working for women through Women, Peace and Security. Our new international strategy for feminist diplomacies is working on gender equality and rights of women and children around the world. Whether peace, human security, climate, or development, no field can avoid working on this gender equality dimension. We must make sure that this is happening. In Afghanistan, the policy of segregation that is put in place by the Taliban is unacceptable and is an affront to our humanity. France has made the respect to women and young girls an absolute necessary stipulation in any communications with the Taliban. In Western Africa and Central Africa, France is working at the sides of UNFPA to distribute medical supplies and birth control resources, as we recognize that reproductive rights are a human rights and public safety issue. We enshrined in our constitution in 2024 the right to an abortion in France, allowing women to take full control of their bodies. We call upon all countries to depenalize abortion. France is a protector of human rights and can do this work through the support of feminist organizations, which we invest in deeply, with having invested 254 million euros in 75 different countries. Following Berlin, The Hague, Mexico, Paris will host the next IPI event on the 22nd and 23rd of October. In a polarized international context, this event will allow us to undertake strategic measures and commit ourselves to multilateralism in a rules-based order. We need these conditions to continue to work on our feminist agenda. We hope to be many together in Paris in October. Thank you very much.
We do have English and French and Spanish translation. It's now my pleasure to turn to Her Excellency Rosa Yolanda Villavicencio, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Colombia.
Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. It is an honor for Colombia to open this space in the framework of the high-level weeks of the United Nations General Assembly and included with the Feminist Foreign Policy Plus group of France, our co-presidency. I also want to thank the International Peace Institute for organizing this wonderful event. We have an urgent reality. This is an era with multiple crises, increased conflictivity and deep polarization. In this context, as gender and diversity are every time more used in the political debate, the voice and leadership of women is more needed than ever. In Colombia, we know this by our own experience. Peace and change are impossible without women. They have gone from being victims and survivors that are invisible in the armed conflict to be a protagonist in the implementation of peace and reconstruction of the social tapestry. The gender approach that was mainstreamed in the Peace Accord in 2016 pioneer worldwide, and the adoption of a feminist policy as well as the implementation of the first action plan of Resolution 1325 are landmarks that reflect an significant progress towards recognizing the inclusion of women organizations that are feminists and LGBTQ plus persons, and in the construction of an integral and sustainable peace. This path, however, is not exclusive in Colombia. In different places in the world, Afghanistan, Haiti, Sudan, Gaza, or Ukraine, we have seen how women are resisting. They are carrying and leading and mediating in the midst of war. They are striving to sustain their communities and their family and open reconciliation routes. And this reminds us of a fundamental reality. Security is never reached through arms. It's through the high respect for life, and with more gender equality and the inclusion of those that are more affected by violence, starting by women in all their diversity. The international community cannot continue to limit itself to declaring principles. The United Nations and member states have the responsibility of ensuring that the participation of women in the mediation, construction, and maintaining of peace has to be significant, robust, and systematic. It cannot happen in episodes. This also means that there has to be a guarantee of sustainable maintenance of their organizations and the establishment of rendering of transparency and commitments for peace and security. This is where feminist policies offer a clear framework. Besides insisting in incorporating or mainstreaming the gender perspective in every item related to peace. This demands that we recognize the intersectorial violence forms, discrimination and exclusion, and also the inequality that women and girls are suffering, as well as persons LGBTQ in conflict environments. In particular, we must combat or fight the sexual violence as a war form and repair effectively through the resolution 1325 of the Security Council. We must recognize that the gap existing between the theory and the practice is still too wide. The feminist policies can help us close this gap by reimagining the link between peace and security from the care focus and approach. And we must continue with the circular approach and South-South cooperation to implement effective peace collaboration and strengthening alliances between state, social, civil society, academy, and others in an environment where we have increased scarcity of resources in the United Nations and others. We must implement innovative financing areas and sectors. We must invest in projects led by women and other tech strategies. This will recover and lead us to development. Excellencies, we have a huge task before us. We need to transform the traditional ways of doing international security. We need to bid for a feminist foreign policy, and that starts by listening, protecting, and empowering women. Colombia reaffirms today its commitment to working so that our voices or their voices are not just a complement. They must be central to all the debates and discussions that we urgently need to implement in this crisis era. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you again to our hosts. IPI is honored to partner on this event with the Permanent Missions of Colombia and France, who are co-chairs of the Feminist Foreign Policy Plus group this year. I want to provide a few brief remarks before we turn to our first panel to situate where we are today. So IPI's Women, Peace, and Security program has been engaging with the Feminist Foreign Policy Plus group since 2023, and it's given us hope to watch this group evolve and progress. In the past few years, the group has expanded its regional diversity, adopted ambitious political declarations, hosted ministerial conferences, and engaged in strategic planning in advance of key negotiations like the Commission on the Status of Women. In today's context, I think we all know it's even more important for this group, along with other member states committed to feminist approaches to foreign policy, to come together and show publicly that although there is a rising backlash against gender equality, there are many countries, like everyone in this room, that's committed to promoting gender equality. Across many events this week at the General Assembly, many of the gender and feminist events, a theme that has been coming across is that we can no longer come together and just speak about the obstacles and the challenges and the environment we're at today, but our energy now must be focused on strategizing, planning, and acting courageously. It's clear that the opposition to women's rights and gender equality is well organized and strategic, but it's possible and needed for those working towards gender equality to also be organized and strategic. So I hope that this conversation today and this room can be part of that process. And we're looking forward to continue those conversations at the 4th Annual Ministerial Conference taking place in Paris next month. We're now going to turn to our first panel with our UN representatives. I'll kindly ask that each of our panelists keep their remarks to no more than 4 minutes so that we can ensure we hear from all speakers on our agenda. So our first panel will be with high-level United Nations representatives. It's my pleasure to turn to His Excellency Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Undersecretary General for Peace Operations.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, excellencies, dear colleagues. I would like to thank the governments of France and Colombia for organizing this event on one of our key priorities of the United Nations. It is also a great pleasure to be here with UN Women and IPI. I would like to thank them for their continued support for these efforts.
Statement. I welcome this critical opportunity to reflect on the intersection of feminist diplomacy and peace operations, an intersection that holds transformative potential in some of the world's most fragile settings. Peace operations, by definition, operate in very difficult contexts, where the consequences of gender equality are starkest, but also where gender-responsive approaches have the most transformative potential. We have scaled up gender-responsive leadership training for mission leadership, and increasingly gender-responsive strategies across our mandates, from protection of civilians to disarmament, demobilization and reintegration, security sector reform, and peace and political processes. Excelencias, me gustaría destacar que las mujeres que trabajan en las misiones de
I'd like to say that women who work into peacekeeping play a pivotal role to conform to these mandates. Their important participation has increased at all levels, and it's still a very important priority for the Department of Peace Operations. However, even though there are solid normative frameworks like Resolution 1325 of the Security Council, women are still underrepresented in the political and peace processes as well as in peacekeeping.
Processes. Allow me to highlight a few concrete examples. In the Central African Republic, our peace operation MINUSCA supports local peace agreements with deliberate focus on women's leadership. Through local peace committees, women have successfully prevented and de-escalated violence at the community level. Feminist diplomacy here means political support and protection for women leaders facing backlash or marginalization. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, MONUSCO employs community-based early warning systems led by women to detect violence, enabling rapid peacekeeper deployment and civilian protection. Feminist diplomacy strengthens survivor-centered responses and ensures women's security concerns are front and center in all political dialogue. L'intégration des femmes dans les opérations de maintien de la paix n'est pas...
Women's role in peacekeeping is also a matter of credibility. It strengthens communities, it builds trust in the communities, and it improves prevention against threats. There are also inspiring examples for women and girls in the local communities. Women make security more inclusive, and they make the political process more legitimate and therefore more effective. Sustainable peace is only possible when women are fully involved in the work on the ground, when they are involved in the decision-making process, and when they're at the negotiating table.
Champion inclusive peace processes where women's voices are not symbolic but decisive. Hold international actors accountable for gender equality commitments within the UN and beyond. Use political influence to support women negotiators and mediators. In closing, I again commend France and Colombia for their leadership in mainstreaming feminist principles in foreign and security policy. This leadership must go beyond declarations, shaping funding priorities, diplomatic practice, and multilateralism itself. Partnerships between member states and the UN are essential to translate feminist diplomacy into tangible peace dividends on the ground. The Department of Peace Operations stands ready to deepen collaboration with member states, UN, women, and civil society to make this agenda a reality in the world's most challenging context, those are critical actors, and we're very much looking forward to work with them and to work with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to turn to Sarah Henricks, Acting Deputy Director, Program Policy and Intergovernmental Support Division, and Director for Policy Program and Intergovernmental Support Decision. Sarah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, and colleagues. Allow me to convey warm greetings from our Executive Director, who could not be here today, which she regrets and very much wanted to pass on her greetings. Mais je suis honorée d'être parmi vous.
I'm delighted to be with you this morning for this important discussion on the role of women in peace building.
Deep thanks to our co-hosts, to France, to Colombia, as co-hosts of the Feminist Foreign Policy Plus group, as well as IPI. Last year, the CEDAW committee clarified that substantive equality means parity. Not only that, it clarified that this applies to peace and security decision-making as well. And it added that this point cannot be emphasized enough, that this principle extends to confidential meetings as well as to back-channel diplomacy. The reason that this point is so significant is that most major conflicts are now being negotiated, as we all know, in closed-door formats. Normally negotiating only partial agreements, such as humanitarian access or prisoner exchanges and temporary ceasefires. These closed-door formats largely exclude women. They also do not generally lead to comprehensive peace agreements and to a resolution of these conflicts. When we advocate for women's participation in peace processes, it is crucial that this commitment to parity applies across all diplomatic efforts and negotiations. Otherwise, dear colleagues, dear excellencies, we will be stuck in the same place, with an average of only 7% of negotiators being women last year, 14% of mediators, and 20% of signatories. Particularly striking is that 9 out of 10 conflicts last year had no women negotiators at all. This exclusion very much reflects the highest number of active conflicts since the end of World War II. And this approach, of course, is not making our world safer. Critical to the response, of course, is to ensure that women-led and women's rights organizations are effectively supported to be at the table. And that is why critical mechanisms across the UN system, such as the Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund, remain imperative. The Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund works across the UN family, ensuring that resources and funding go directly to women leaders at the front lines of women, peace, security action. It finances local organizations and women human rights defenders with grants and direct advocacy support in conflict and crisis-affected contexts. Many of you around this table are Security Council members, and you will have seen the advanced copy of the Secretary General's annual report on women, peace, and security. It asks that when governments reaffirm their commitment to this agenda in the upcoming anniversary of 1325 plus 25, that governments do so by committing to setting and enforcing targets and quotas for women in any of the peace and security processes that benefit from government funding or from your involvement, including peace negotiations and broader political processes. This also includes national dialogues. Of course, it may be hard to change the composition of closed-door negotiations on specific issues, but national dialogues that purport to be representative of the diversity of a country should not continue to be held with women's representation hovering at just 20 or 30%, which is still the case this year in 2025. As I close, let me reinforce that the Women, Peace, Security agenda is comprehensive. It is expansive. It was born out of the desire and the intention of changing the composition of peace tables and of giving peace a much better chance. That goal has not yet been achieved. Our plea is that countries with a feminist foreign policy would lead the way, that countries with a feminist foreign policy would turn this calculus around, not just in general expressions of support for women's participation in principle, but in the very specific processes that member states with feminist foreign policies have influence over. I look forward to the fruitful discussions today and to the deeper reflection on these issues at the forthcoming 4th Feminist Foreign Policy Conference in Paris, hosted by the government of France next month. With this, je vous remercie. Merci.
Thank you so much. It's now my privilege to start our first ministerial panel. And we're excited because this panel has two of the newest members of the Feminist Foreign Policy Plus group, Slovenia and Morocco, who I believe their minister is on the way. I also want to recognize that we have other supporters and participants in the room. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Haiti has joined us, and I believe we will have other ministers and delegates coming in. So thank you all for being here. So to begin our first panel, I'd like to turn to His Excellency Olivier Degun-Gehere, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Rwanda.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, let me begin by thanking France and Colombia for co-chairing the Feminist Foreign Policy Plus group and for organizing this annual ministerial side event. The theme for this year could not be more timely given the current global context of multiple crises, polarization, and persistent threats to peace and security. As the global community marks 30 years since the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action, and 25 years since the Security Council Resolution 1325, Rwanda commemorates 31 years since the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Our recovery will not have been possible without a decision from the very beginning to involve women as equal players in rebuilding trust, strengthening societal resilience, and leading national recovery. Rwanda's experience demonstrates that women's leadership is not an added value, but a precondition for peace. From our perspective, three key lessons stand out. First, meaningful inclusion at all levels. In Rwanda, women participate in decision-making from the community to national level. At the grassroots, nearly half of our Abunzi mediators, who are community-based dispute resolution committees, are women. They resolve local conflicts peacefully, preventing escalation and building social cohesion. At national and international levels, women serve in security and justice leadership roles. And today, Rwanda is the largest contributor of female police officers to UN peacekeeping, performing different tasks, including protecting women against sexual violence. This indicates that when women are entrusted with responsibility, they deliver tangible peace dividends at all levels. Second, commitment must be localized. Declarations in New York or Geneva are not meaningful when are only meaningful when translated into concrete action. Rwanda was among the first African countries to adopt a national action plan on women, peace, and security in 2009. And we are now implementing our third plan, 2023-2028, fully aligning with UNSC Resolution 1325. These plans ensure that women actively shape peace processes and contribute to security outcomes, turning commitments into measurable results. Third, political will and good governance are essential. Progress is achieved not through finger pointing, but by political choices that prioritize equality, accountability, and inclusivity. In Rwanda, sustained leadership commitment has made women's participation a pillar of governance, from parliament, where women are 61% of the parliament, which is the highest rate in the world, and the cabinet, also to local councils and community structures where women are also well represented. Moreover, Rwanda believes in women empowerment, not only in our country, but around the world. In this regard, when conflict erupted in Kabul, Afghanistan in 2021, with the takeover of the Taliban, Rwanda moved a whole school of 100 girls, the School of Leadership, Afghanistan, SOLA, to Rwanda with the whole staff. Most of the girls have now graduated, if not all, and are the Afghan leaders of tomorrow. These lessons reinforce a central point. Gender transformative approaches to foreign policy and peace building succeed when backed by national action, inclusive participation, and even political will. Rwanda looks forward to continuing to collaborate with all members of this group, alongside the UN and other stakeholders, to ensure that women's leadership and rights remain central to peace building and sustainable development globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's now my pleasure to turn to Her Excellency Batseg Batmonk, Foreign Minister of Mongolia.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it's a great pleasure to participate in this important event. I wish to extend my sincere gratitude to France and Colombia. Also, I'm happy to see the extension of our family and congratulate Morocco, Nepal, Slovenia, and the United Kingdom, our new members. So, distinguished delegates, Mongolia's gender equality measures remain above the regional average, performing well in education and health, and we have been working progressively on the improvement of women's political participation and economic opportunity. Let me share some experience with Mongolia in this regard. First, women can contribute to peacekeeping and peace building meaningfully through their presence at policymaking level. For instance, since 2024, women MPs, including myself, represent 25% of the national parliament. This achievement positions Mongolia as one of the leading countries in Asia for women's representation in parliament. Second, the role of women in Mongolia's foreign policy has been steadily on the rise. Until 90s, less than 10% of the foreign ministry staff were women. Today, half of our staff and the managerial positions are held by women. This share undoubtedly reflects on Mongolian diplomacy for having a peace-loving and multi-pillar policies and being a strong advocate for international initiatives on advancement of women and gender equality. Third, Mongolia is a dedicated contributor to global peace and security for over 20 years and has been participated actively in UN peacekeeping operations and supported the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. Currently, the proportion of female officers among our peacekeepers is 14%, which is very close to the UN appeal of making this percent 15 by 2027. Mongolia is one of the troop contributing countries awarded with women-specific personal protective equipment in 2025, and recognition of the achievement of the Uniform Gender Parity Strategy target and deployment of female personnel in operational roles. Moreover, I have been informing about our initiatives and events held in Mongolia at the previous high-level meetings. Since 2022, Mongolia has hosted a series of significant international conferences, including Women in Peacekeeping, Female Foreign Ministers Meeting, World Women's Forum, and lastly, World Women Entrepreneurs Forum in August. This conference has brought together hundreds of international and national female leaders and representatives from all sectors and yielded fruitful discussions and outcome documents on enhancing the role of women and gender equality in global peace and security, multilateral relations, social development, business, and green future. Finally, as climate change has started playing a huge role in all decisions and plans, including the ones on gender equality and feminist foreign policy, Mongolia is attempting to be proactive in this field. In this regard, I want to invite you to the 17th conference of the parties to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, to be held on 17 to 28 August 2026 in Ulaanbaatar, and contribute to enriching implementation of the UNCCD with gender-responsive climate action. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to turn to His Excellency Nasser Bourita, Minister of Foreign Affairs, African Cooperation, and Moroccan Expatriates of Morocco.
Madame la Ministre, Monsieur le
Dear Minister, dear distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be among you today. I thank France and Colombia and the IPI for organizing this event, which resounds, which echoes with the vision of the Kingdom of Morocco. This is our first participation in the FFP Plus framework, but not our last. In a few weeks, France will host the fourth FPP Plus event, and we will be there. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our participation today is not an act of conformity, but an expression of our dedication. We are joining a group of like-minded people that share the same values as we do. Our king believes strongly in the empowerment of women. And with this conviction, we proceed with action. In terms of all the crises that we are facing, we cannot think as we did yesterday. We must introduce the gaze and perspective of women, as well as their approach. This is not a concession, but rather a correction, so that we can see the world as it is by integrating a feminist perspective, understanding that this will allow us to protect and serve our people better in our security system. Women have continuously fought to break apart the systems that hurt them. We are not only working on a justice dimension, but we are seeking a sustainable peace system. This is why we have launched the 2026 Moroccan Plan for Peace and Security. And I will mention we will launch it officially in a following panel today. Our exercise is the following. We can no longer consider the maintenance and building of peace without the participation of women. Their involvement in peace maintenance will allow us to guarantee life, not the continuation of war. For Morocco, this translates itself to several conclusions. First of all, in terms of peace building, we will increase the presence of women in our contingents, in our units that are working on this. In terms of Morocco's involvement in peace operations around the world, we have involved 120 women in our groups of peace operators. Concretely, we need to instrumentalize them. Each moderator, feminine moderator, is able to increase social cohesion and bring a human perspective to peace building. We also are working on gender-based violence with implementing a zero tolerance policy. This means that violence cannot be relativized. We consider this not a collateral damage, but rather direct threats to peace and collective security. Finally, in terms of prevention of extremist violence and the maintenance of peace, we value the voice of women as educators and preventers. Women bring balance to the dialogue and allow us to reduce hate speech and rhetoric. For us, this feminist perspective, ladies and gentlemen, is imbuing the way that we deal with peace and security. We are no longer able to see this as an external perspective. Morocco is involved in is undertaking an irreversible transformation in this regard. Our 2024 Family Code and 2027 reforms and their 2011 laws with regards to violence against women show that we are shifting our policies with regards to women. And because women's rights are not only enshrined in texts, we have enshrined them in our education and economic governance systems. Morocco has shifted the rate of education of girls upwards. We have been able to bring 23 women to parliament today. This is at all levels of government. We have been able to increase the participation of women. Women represent 48% of our personnel in our ministry. They occupy 50% of positions of responsibility, and 21 of our ambassadors are women. They lead among some of the most strategic embassies. And I'm not trying to simply just throw numbers at you. We are showing you the work in progress that we are undertaking. And we are looking forward to a future where this will no longer be something we have to talk about, that will simply be the status quo. Ladies and gentlemen, our membership in the FFP Plus in the context of the 1325 resolution and the Pekin Declaration shows our dedication to espouse the values of this group, to follow in the wake of the leadership of Southern countries. Since 2022, we have celebrated women's work in diplomacy every 24th of June. I am proud that this was passed in a resolution on women supported by Morocco in April of 2025 during its presidency of the Human Rights Council. So for us, every day is a World Day for Women in Diplomacy. This is to say that we need to build a world where every man and woman has their place, a role to play. We know that the actions that we undertake here can weaken systems elsewhere. Morocco, as a member of FFP Plus, will be an active member, committed, constructive, and loyal to its principles of building an equitable future. I thank you for your attention.
And a warm welcome to the FFP Plus group. I'm now going to turn to another new member, Her Excellency Dr. Melita Gabric, State Secretary for Multilateral Affairs, Political Affairs, and Development Cooperation of Slovenia.
Everyone, Excellencies, first of all, I would like to thank Colombia, France, and the IPI for convening us today. It is my great pleasure, and I am proud to be a member, that Slovenia is a member of this group, and I also congratulate Morocco for joining the group. Let me say in no uncertain terms right at the outset, Slovenia is fully committed to working on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, both at home and internationally. UN reports are alarming regarding just any indicator for women, peace, and security. They reconfirm that conflicts affect women and girls disproportionately. Given the rising number of conflicts, the global situation of women and girls is deteriorating. Women and girls in places such as Afghanistan, Sudan, Haiti, and Gaza have minimal to no political strength to change their situation, and yet they greatly suffer the consequences of political decisions they have little or no influence over. So we must support their agency and leadership, and we have this power, and we must use it. This group is important, an important platform to take our joint ambition in this regard forward. Women's participation is a proven strategy for sustainable peace and stability. In other words, there is no sustainable peace without a meaningful inclusion and participation of women in peace processes. As UN Security Council member, Slovenia strives to include women and take their specific situation into account in any political or security process. We support the work of international and regional organizations on the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and we support the work, the very important work of local women's civil society leaders in conflict and crisis settings. Slovenia has strong representation of women in national diplomacy. And not just that, we have a woman president, we have a woman speaker of the parliament, we have a woman minister of foreign affairs, and we have women in other leadership positions. And we encourage strong representation of women in the United Nations and other international and regional organizations. Regretfully, in the 80 years of UN's existence, there has not been a woman Secretary General, and only 5 women have been elected as presidents of the UN General Assembly. Further commitment to advancing gender parity remains imperative during the forthcoming selection process for the next UN Secretary General. Of course, the aspiration is that this milestone may be achieved through the appointment of a woman as the next Secretary General. Slovenia also supports endeavors to strengthen the participation of women in peace operations at all levels. This helps the missions to address the needs of the communities in which they operate on the one hand, and on the other, it is an additional impetus for the empowerment of women and their inclusion in the political processes and peace-building activities. At home, we are in the final stages of adopting a new national action plan on women, peace, and security. And this new plan mainstreams the agenda across security policies, including those dealing with various crises, disaster relief, and civil protection, with a strong note on the participation and leadership of women in design and the implementation of all aspects of security policy, including on management of critical infrastructure. In conclusion, we look forward to cooperating with all of you within the Foreign Feminist Foreign Policy Group, and to take further our joint action on participation of women in peacekeeping and peace building, and of course in wider sense in promoting and taking forward gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome again to the newest members of our group. We'll now turn to the second ministerial panel to some of our long-standing group members. We're thrilled to have here Her Excellency Elisa Spiropoli, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of Albania. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all, excellencies, distinguished colleagues. History has taught us that a simple truth: peace and development without women are neither just nor sustainable. 30 years after the Beijing Declaration and 25 years after Security Council Resolution 1325, we know that women's leadership is not optional. It is essential. When women sit at the negotiating table, peace lasts longer. When gender perspectives are integrated, humanitarian response is more effective. And when women's rights are protected, societies are more resilient. For Albania, advancing gender equality is both a national priority and a guiding principle of our foreign policy. Our National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, now in its third circle, provides a framework to strengthen women's leadership in conflict prevention, security sector reform, and recovery. As Vice Chair of the UN Women Executive Board and during our mandate as UN Security Council, Albania consistently championed the WPS agenda, from ensuring women's full participation in peace processes to protecting women's human rights defenders and addressing conflict-related sexual violence. A successful foreign policy, as we modestly demonstrate, is rooted in a strong domestic commitment to women's empowerment and advancing gender equality at home. Today, Albania stands as a champion of women's rights and gender equality, ranking among the top 10 countries globally for women in government. More than 50% of our ministerial positions are held by women. And we reached a record in 2021. We had 72% women in government. I think we were ranking #1 in the UN Charter. Women represent 32% of our parliament, and they're also represented in all levels of high positions, from the Constitutional Court that is led by a woman to other positions, like I was Speaker of the Parliament before, and before me there was another woman Speaker of the Parliament, and so on. We have institutionalized gender responsive budgeting, raising allocations for equality from just 2% of the national budget in 2017 to over 10% today. We've also closed the gender gap in education, expanding women's economic participation, invested in digital inclusion and entrepreneurship for women and girls. Still, challenges remain, absolutely, but we believe that by combining domestic reform with international leadership, all our countries can show that empowering women at home is the foundation for a successful foreign policy abroad. At a time when women and girls face disproportionate burdens in crisis, and when hard-won gains are under threat, we must redouble our efforts. This requires political will, adequate financing, and renewed commitment to multilateralism. So we also are the same opinion with Slovenia that it is time for the UN to have a woman Secretary General. The work of the FFP Plus group is vital to building alliances, sharing good practices, ensuring that feminist principles remain at the heart of peace and security. Albania stands ready to work with all partners, member states, the UN, civil society, to ensure that women's voices and leadership are placed where they belong, at the very center of peace building and development. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's so nice to hear positive statistics every once in a while. Thank you so much. I'd now like to turn to Her Excellency Antonia Arena, Minister of Women and Gender Equality of Chile.
Muchas gracias, muy buenos días a todas las delegaciones, autoridades y colegas aquí presentes. Es un honor poder dirigirme a ustedes en el nombre de Chile en este evento del Feminist Foreign Policy Plus Group. Quiero dar la más cordial bienvenida a los nuevos miembros de este grupo, como Marruecos, Nepal, Eslovenia y el Reino Unido. Su incorporación fortalece nuestra capacidad para poder avanzar en un multilateralismo inclusivo en etapas de crisis como hoy, capaz de responder a los complejos desafíos que estamos enfrentando. Nos sumamos también a las previas palabras de Francia sobre la necesidad de discutir sobre los derechos sexuales y reproductivos, discusión que vamos a iniciar prontamente en nuestro país en el Congreso, y también a lo señalado por la ministra Villavicencio de Colombia a propósito de la responsabilidad de los estados sobre la reparación.
The present international scenario shows us that the rights of women and girls cannot be acquired because we are witnessing setbacks that threaten decades of progress, especially in context of occupation and armed conflict. In this sense, the urgency is even greater because it is clear where women participate in significantly, the agreements are more solid and the institutions become more resilient. This is why we thank the women support in our historic Accord on Peace. Our feminist foreign policy is based on equality and non-discrimination as the guiding principle for Chile's international actions. With the recent launch of our third national action plan for Resolution 1325, the first was, of course, during the first presidency of ex-President Michelle Bachelet. We have incorporated a notion of human and intersectional security, recognizing women as essential agents of peace. We also, there are more threats in our field, like the criminal activity and the sexual trafficking of women, as well as the necessary control of the civil society concerning our goals. But we need cooperation and more solidarity. That is why we are motivating the materialization of the vision of external feminist policy, working along with Canada to exchange experiences on gender mainstreaming, with Morocco to share lessons learned on laws that address economic violence, and with Palestine, a state that we recognize, in order to collaborate on territorial reconstruction processes with a gender perspective. Chile is a peaceful country, but we know how to reconstruct from the ground up. And even though we wish it were not necessary, we're going to put our efforts for the solution of two states and the respect of international human rights. These are concrete agreements on how international cooperation can transform promises to women in tangible acts for women to wish to develop this, of course, does not depend only on the external policy, but we also recognize that feminist external policy is a very useful tool that positions the necessity of women's dignity at the center of international action. As it was also very clear during the last CSW session, it's even though that we don't make much noise, we are the countries who believe in equality are more. So I thank the remarks of Albania and Slovenia for reiterating that we need a woman Secretary General at the UN. Thank you very much.
Our civil society panel. We are thrilled to have two civil society speakers here today. I'm going to first turn to Kavya Asoka, Executive Director of the NGO Working Group on Women, Peace, and Security.
Thank you so much to France, Colombia, and IPI for hosting this event and for the opportunity for this brief intervention. And thank you all, Excellencies, for prioritizing women's rights in your foreign policies. I'm Kavya Ashok, and I represent the NGO Working Group on Women, Peace and Security, a civil society coalition of 18 international organizations dedicated to upholding women's rights in conflict. A founding principle of the Women, Peace and Security agenda is that no peace is possible without the equal participation of women or respect for their human rights. But as you've heard today, we are perilously far from achieving that goal. As I'm sure you will hear from Ms. Nagina Yari, in Afghanistan, the Taliban continue to entrench their rule over the country, brutally suppressing the rights and freedoms of Afghan women and girls and anyone who resists their gender apartheid regime. In Sudan, women and girls face appalling levels of conflict-related sexual violence. And of course, in Gaza, women and girls endure famine, forced displacement, reproductive violence, and other violations of their rights as part of Israel's genocide against Palestinians. We are simultaneously seeing an authoritarian pushback against everything that the WPS agenda stands for: equality, inclusivity, human rights, demilitarization, respect for international law, accountability, both globally and within the UN. For instance, in 2025 thus far, the percentage of Security Council resolutions that include women's rights has fallen by 21% since 2020. Our experience has taught us that it is not a deficit of international laws and norms, but of the political will to enforce them. This is where you, this cross-regional group of countries with feminist foreign policies, can play a critical leadership role. You can not only uphold and protect existing standards, but raise the bar for what can and must be done to advance women's rights, especially at a time when they are under siege. Here are 6 things that you can do individually and collectively. First, commit to stopping arms transfers when there is a substantial risk that they may be used to commit or facilitate serious acts of gender-based violence or serious acts of violence against women and children in line with the Arms Trade Treaty. Second, be the guardians of women's rights. This includes respect for all women's rights, including sexual and reproductive health and rights, and their right to live free from all forms of gender-based violence. This also means, importantly, holding the line on gender equality, women's rights, and WPS when they are under attack, especially at multilateral institutions like the Security Council. Third, insist on women at the table. This not only means politically and financially supporting women's meaningful participation in peace and political processes and advocating for their participation at 50%. It also means calling out peace processes that fail to include women and withholding your endorsement until they do. 4, demand justice and accountability for violations of women's rights. This includes publicly condemning such violations, including all forms of gender-based violence and attacks against women human rights defenders. Ensure they are thoroughly and swiftly investigated and hold perpetrators accountable. Pursue accountability strategies that center gender, including by considering codifying gender apartheid, supporting prosecutions of gender persecution at the International Criminal Court, and ensuring accountability for violations of CEDAW at the ICJ. Stand with women's civil society movements. Civil society is more important than ever today, but we ourselves are at risk. Funding cuts and the targeting of women human rights defenders threaten everything we do. Your support for the independent voices of civil society and your resources so that we can continue our necessary work will be essential for sustaining our movements. Lastly, fund peace, not war. We are not only seeing a proliferation of conflict, we are seeing exponential increases in military spending. In 2024, military spending exceeded 2.7 trillion, the steepest annual rise since the Cold War. Meanwhile, funding for gender equality and to women's rights organizations is nowhere near reaching the baseline targets set by the UN. And cuts both to the UN and to women's organizations pose an existential threat to the global fight for gender equality. You can help by meeting the minimum target of earmarking 15% of funds for programs that advance gender equality and allocating a minimum of 1% of overseas development assistance for women's rights organizations, with a firm commitment to increasing it in the future. In conclusion, at a moment when it seems like we are moving back, when the politics of fear and repression seem to rule the day, when it seems like the only way to survive the current political climate is to keep one's head down and protect one's own interests, I urge you to let your feminist foreign policy guide your actions. A first principle of feminist thought is that nobody is free until everybody is free. Join the courageous women human rights defenders who fight for our collective future daily in being a first line of defense. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kavya. And now I'd like to turn to Najina Yari, Executive Director of Windows for Hope.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you from French Columbia and IPI for hosting this important event. Distinguished panelists, delegates, and colleagues. Since the Taliban returned in power, we have witnessed one of the most systematic and erasure of women's rights in modern history. They have issued over 100 repressive decrees and more than 55 directly targeting women and girls in Afghanistan. Girls are banned from secondary and higher education. Women are excluded from work, from public life, and even from traveling without male guardian. Just yesterday, the de facto authorities have issued another repressive decrees for Balkh and Kandahar provinces that male dentists are not allowed treatment of female patent. Most recently, imposed internet restriction and shutdown in almost 5 provinces, including Balkh and Herat provinces. One of the young girls from our online school mentioned that this is not the shutdown of internet, this is the shutdown of my future and my connection with the world. This is deliberate strategy to isolate us and silence us. And while this is happening, the world remains largely silent. International attention policies are now focused on how to engage and how to increase pragmatic engagement or normalize the de facto authorities in a state holding them accountable. We see this clearly in UNAMA-led Mosaic process, a political roadmap intended to shape Afghanistan's future. But Afghan women are excluded from it. And let me say this, any process that excludes half of the population, it will not bring the legitimacy and sustainability. Meanwhile, the Taliban are thinking long-term as the world looks away. They are institutionalizing gender apartheid, designing a system meant to last for generations. And we must understand this. This crisis in Afghanistan will not remain in Afghanistan. A regime built on extremism and oppression of women is a threat not only for Afghan women and not only for Afghanistan, but to regional and global security. Despite everything, Afghan women continue to resist. They run underground school, demand accountability from international community. We are not victims. We are the leader of Afghanistan, and we are the future of Afghanistan. But we cannot and should not be expected to fight this battle alone. This is where feminist foreign policy becomes vital. It redefines security as the safety and dignity of women and girls, not just survival of the state. By funding women-led organizations, allies building on the ground, ensure digital access, supporting equal access of women and girls to healthcare services, and design aid that empower women rather than sideline them or count them as a recipient of aid. And to grant their political participation, not as a choice, but as a rule in any political process. It is the time for foreign feminist countries to turn commitment into impact. The truth is clear. Without foreign feminist policy center, peace and security does not last. And nowhere is that clear than in Afghanistan. And I want to end with this message from Afghan women who mentioned from Afghanistan. Do not forget us. Our struggle is not over. Our fight is for dignity, equality, and freedom. Continuously, every single day, we are fighting for that, often a greater personal risk. The decision you make will determine whether we live under permanent oppression or whether we can reclaim our future. The path to sustain peace and sustainable security runs through the leadership of Afghan women. We are ready. The question is, will you stand with us? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nagina. Thank you for being here and for bringing those voices into that room, this room. Thank you again. I'd now like to turn to Her Excellency Maritza Chan, Permanent Representative and Chair of the 70th session of the Commission on the Status of Women.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to offer a warm welcome to Slovenia, Morocco, and the United Kingdom to the group. A feminist foreign policy must be inclusive, transformational, intersectional, and above all, intentional. Intentional because at the current rate, it will take 300 years to achieve full gender parity. Intentional because it will take 140 years for women to reach equal representations in workplace leadership, and 40 years for parity in national parliaments. And maybe it will take a woman's lifetime to see the end of extreme poverty. Intentional because women and girls, without women and girls, we will not achieve none of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Without their full inclusion, there will be no lasting peace, no sustainable development, and no meaningful progress. A feminist foreign policy must recognize that violence is, as you said, a gender phenomenon. It is inevitable. It's not inevitable. It's the product of gender norms that weaponry can trigger. It can be prevented through good practices, robust implementation, appropriate funding, and responsible arms control instruments. A feminist foreign policy must focus on meaningful representation. We must move beyond superficial representation to meaningful leadership. And yes, here at the UN, we need more women as president of the General Assembly, more women ambassadors, more women heading departments and delegations. We need gender parity in all forms, particularly when it comes to disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control, where only 1/3 of participants are women. And yes, after 80 years of uninterrupted male leadership, it is the next Secretary General must be a woman. But representation alone is insufficient. A feminist foreign policy must put human security before security theater, prevention before destruction, dialogue before dominance. Half of the world's population are half of the world's solutions. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to honor our another new member of the group for a short intervention from the UK, from Beth Arty, Director for Education, Gender and Equalities of the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office.
Thank you so much, Excellencies, Honourable Ministers, colleagues. I am so delighted to be here representing the United Kingdom as one of the newest members of
Como uno de los nuevos miembros de este grupo. Tenemos el honor de unirnos con Eslovenia este año y estamos esperando trabajar como parte de esta comunidad de campeonas para las mujeres y las niñas en la escena internacional. Quiero extender mi apreciación a Colombia y Francia y al EPI que han dado leadership crítico en este grupo y nos han dado una colaboración muy valiosa. El lunes en el evento Beijing Macerte me encontré con el secretario de Cooper que habló de su compromiso personal a esta agenda. Su mensaje fue uno.
And she highlighted the need to ensure that the multilateral system remains a powerful force for women and girls everywhere. In order to deliver this, it is more important than ever that we come together as a strong, diverse, and dynamic partnership of countries who will drive accelerated progress. And I know that she looks forward to working with all her counterparts in this group, alongside our special envoy for women and girls, Baroness Harriet Harman. Nowhere are the rights of women and girls more under threat and the risks of gender-based violence more extreme than in conflict and crisis settings. And while our progress has been made, it is fragile and faltering. We must make further strides in implementing our resolution and commitments that have followed from the WPS 1325. In the past year, the UK has been proud to have advocated strongly for women's participation in peace processes from Sudan to the Philippines. And since 2012, we have spearheaded the Preventing Sexual Violence and Conflict initiative, with successive administrations working to elevate conflict-related sexual violence as a global foreign policy priority, requiring the highest level of engagement, securing commitments from states around the world, and delivering the detailed work of supporting legal reform and landmark convictions. In every case, we find that prioritizing women and girls in conflict and peace building is not just a moral imperative, it is a strategic one. It strengthens effectiveness, builds trust, and helps build sustainable peace and security at all levels. So we are delighted to partner with you in New York and around the world, and we look forward to working with this group to drive forward our collective progress for women and girls everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know we're just at time. There were some other group members who unfortunately we won't have time, but I want to recognize their leadership, Spain and Germany. Thank you for being here. And I want to conclude by noting the energy and enthusiasm and commitment in this room and hoping we can hold that amongst each other and keep that going. I heard the words transformative several times in multiple people's remarks. We heard the word intentional. So just keeping those guiding ideas with us. And I hope to see many of you in Paris at the fourth Ministerial Conference. Thank you.
you.